Hello there! Let's go through my gear for 2022, even though I did want to do this in 2021. I was just waiting for the red Sire P-Bass to come in before I made this video. Starting off, we have my 1986 Fender Jazz from Japan. I bought this in 2003 from a guy in New York who neglected to tell me that the truss rod had been maxed out, so the neck was a little bowed and I could not straighten it, so this is a replacement neck from Warmouth. This was my first Warmouth purchase. It is a quarter-sawn maple neck with a rosewood fingerboard and 6150 nickel frets. Maybe in hindsight I should have got the stainless steel, but my touch is so light at this point that I'm not really putting too much damage into the frets. This bass is almost 20 years old. The neck is almost 20 years old, and there's almost no fret wear whatsoever, so I'm not too worried. The pickups are micro coils by Bill Lawrence. They have extra pole pieces, which definitely changes the magnetic field, and I'm not sure if that contributes to the difference in sound from the original pickups, but certainly the fact that they are micro coils and more or less humbuckers, they have no 60-cycle hum. That affects the tone as well. I think it still does sound like a jazz bass, but it sounds different than the original pickups that were in it. This is my 2016 build, my first full assembly of an instrument. This is another Warmouth project, so this is a vintage white P-Bass with a roasted maple neck. The pickups again are Bill Lawrence, sort of the P-Bass version of the micro coils. Again, you can see these have extra pole pieces. I think these pickups sound great. They're the best P-Bass pickups I've heard in any instrument I've had, not that I've had that many. I think whether it's the quarter-sawn maple neck, which hardly budges, these roasted maple necks as well, they are very solid. They can chip a little bit, and there is some precautions that need to be taken if you're drilling a hole into it. That wood is so dry that it chip much easier than regular maple. But the benefits, to me, far outweigh any sort of risks you might experience. The neck is so stable, it has had minimal shrinkage. It smells like maple syrup when you first get it. It doesn't require a finish. I couldn't be happier with the shape and the profile of the neck. I think Warmouth does such an amazing job of all that stuff. I would say this bass and the 1986 jazz bass are the two ones that I use most if I'm playing live. So the exception to the playing live rule would be this. I believe this is a 2019 made in Mexico jazz bass. I bought this to play in the cover band I'm in because we always play in dropped tuning. This bass is tuned to E-flat standard, and I did not want to have to retune a bass, adjust the neck, adjust the intonation every time I had a gig with the cover band. So once again, roasted maple neck. Once you get a roasted maple neck, there's no going back. They feel so good. They look good. This one has the tiniest frets. I think they're 6230s. Again, nickel. I got like the vintage size frets, because after getting the Dingwall, which has super tiny frets on it, I really did like the feel of the smaller frets. And my touch is so light, as I mentioned, that I don't really put too much damage into the frets. So not much has been replaced on this, really just the bridge, and I also rewired it so it just has one volume knob and then a switch that does nothing. The switch was initially going to be a electronics bypass, so the pickups would go straight to the output jack, but I just never, for some reason I could never get it to work the way I wanted, so now the switch does nothing. But I really only need one volume, one tone. With the cover band, I hardly even ever touch the tone knob. There's maybe a few songs where I have to dial it back a bit. The thing about these basses, when you're left-handed, it's all right-handed pots, so my tone knob doesn't have a fade on it. It is just either all on or all off. I can't fine-tune it. I would have to get a left-handed taper pot or take this pot apart. I'm not about to do either of those things. Not for this. I don't need it. This one also has a Hipshot D tuner on it. The cover band plays a few songs in drop D, and they are the kind of songs where you could play on a 5-string and use the low D on that 5th string, but it just doesn't make too much sense a lot of the time. A lot of the songs need that open D string. It does sound different, and that was the way the songs were recorded, so might as well stick to that. This is the Dingwall I got right at the start of the pandemic, right before I lost my job, right before I lost all of my jobs. It is basically stock. The only thing that has recently changed is I put a 6-way pickup selector in it. So I did make a video on that. I can link to it, but that is the only thing that's changed on this bass. I don't really feel there's much need to change anything. Currently I have the pickguard off of it because I think it looks nice, but this bass I really got because there are so few 5-strings that are left-handed. This seemed like such a departure from the Fenders that I have that I thought it would be a nice addition to the collection, and just to have a 5-string. Seems like a lot of songs, a lot of bands. A 5-string is required, at least a low D or a low E flat. It is nice to have a low E flat playing some country songs that are in E flat without having to go into drop D or to grab a different bass that's tuned differently or something like that. This ukulele bass, this was almost just like an impulse buy. I saw it on AliExpress for around $100, and I was very curious. I had an acoustic ukulele bass in the past, and I liked it, but it had some very serious tone limitations. So seeing this one having the 3 knobs, it has a volume, and then it has an EQ. It has a high and low EQ. That was the part that really appealed to me, because I find with these polyurethane strings, you really hear a lot of finger noise when you're plucking. But I am able to roll off the high end a lot and sort of get rid of that sound. The low end of the EQ is basically unusable. It gives you so much bass that it sounds terrible. But I feel like I can get a good tone out of this. I've made a few covers with it. It is more of a toy, but it's also nice to be able to sit with such a little bass on my lap and just figure out songs or do some improvising or something like that. For $100, I can't really complain. The intonation is good. The tuners are plastic, but they still feel fine. It is not like there's a lot of tension on this thing. It has a truss rod, so I think it's well made. I think it's well made, especially for the price. This is the upright bass that I bought from Gullier Music in 2003 when I was going to school for music. Almost every bassist had an upright by the end of the program. This is an Engelhardt EM1. It was the second cheapest model that they offered. Oddly enough, Engelhardt was bought by Upton, and Upton is the company that made my current bass. This bass that you're looking at now has since been sold. I actually managed to sell it to a guy who lives maybe 5 kilometers from me. Some guy who used to play bass in his younger days and now is getting back into it. So I'm happy that it found a new home. I would like to have several uprights, but really one is probably enough. Not much to say about this. I do not know what the wood is. The fingerboard you can see is rosewood. I think it looks nice. I think it's a gorgeous bass, but it sort of ran its course, and I felt I was very limited on it. It doesn't have the greatest sound, certainly not for classical music. Great pitch sound, really great for bluegrass and jazz. I played it a whole lot. There were years where I was hardly even touching electric and had pretty much put all of my time into this upright bass. And here is my current upright bass. So I guess this would be a 2021 Upton Bohemian. This is more or less their entry-level model. You can get one that's cheaper. This is sort of the first model that allows you to do any sort of customizations. I got to pick the varnish, I guess. Like I could add on violin corners, or I could have a solid top or solid back and sides. You could do anything you wanted, provided you're willing to pay for it. But this, like the last bass, just a fully plywood bass. I don't want anything that I'm going to have to baby. I think this bass is sounding better all the time. It's fairly comparable in volume to the Engelhardt, but it does seem like it maybe pushes a little more air. I think the tone is a little nicer. Hopefully as it ages, even though it's plywood, it'll continue to get a better and better tone. You can see I have a magnetic pickup on the bottom of the bridge, or the bottom of the fingerboard. And then I also have a transducer on the bridge as well, so I can blend a magnetic and an acoustic sound. And here's the latest acquisition. This would be, I think, still 2021. Even though I got it in 2022, this is a Sire P5. And would you believe that the 5 in the name has nothing to do with the number of strings? It gets very confusing. But P, I assume, is because it's essentially a P bass. Once again, roasted maple neck. I cannot resist them. When I saw these basses launch over a year ago, I thought, I must have it. And like I mentioned before with the Dingwall, it is very rare to get a 5-string left-handed bass. Schecter and some other companies do make 5 strings, but I just don't like the look of them. I was so interested in a very traditional passive 5-string, and this delivered. I have no real complaints about it. The inside of the upper horn was not finished though. It seems like it got a final sanding but was never buffed, which is kind of strange. And then there are some odd tool markings on the top of the headstock. Neither of those things really matter to me. The bass is very playable. The action I was able to set up really nice. The neck required no adjustment, and even if it did, unlike the Fenders I have, this has a huge access to the truss rod at the pick guard there, where the neck meets the body. You can see it has a huge cutout so that I can easily adjust the truss rod. Fender still does not do this. It blows my mind that the number one company drops the ball over and over again like that. The difference between this one and the Dingwall, certainly a huge difference in the B string, both in the tension and clarity. But really, when you're in a mix, when you're playing live, a lot of that clarity gets lost in the house speakers and in the amplifier anyways. I think this is a great bass. It's nice to have some parallel frets. The fan frets get a little confusing, especially in the higher register. So I really enjoy that this is about as traditional as you can get while still being modern, having that truss rod access and being 5-string. Couldn't be happier with it. Moving on to guitars, this was the first guitar build I did, again from Warmouth. This is obviously a shell pink Strat, roasted maple neck, as though that's any surprise at this point. The oversized headstock, simply because that's more or less what Hendrix played all the time. I love the look of the oversized headstock when it's upside down. These, again, are Bill Lawrence pickups. They have individually adjustable pole pieces like you often find on humbuckers. I had never seen this for single coil Strat pickups before. And again, like my jazz bass, these are microcoil pickups, so they're totally silent. They're fairly similar to the noiseless ones you get on an actual Fender, but I like these more, if for no other reason than the pole pieces are adjustable, which makes a really big difference in being able to even out the volume output for each string. And like the Fender noiseless, they do lose a bit of that sort of ice pick edge that single coils are known for. But I don't mind it being a little tame if I can have no noise and have a little more control over the volume of each string. You can see I have the Graphtec saddles. I got a set of these in maybe 96 or something like that, and I have never broken a string since. Before I got these Graphtec saddles, I would bust strings all the time. I was playing a lot of blues when I started learning guitar and bending a lot of strings, playing a lot of Hendrix, and always breaking strings. The second I got these Graphtec saddle savers, it has been 25 years, something like that, since I've broken a string on guitar. It just doesn't happen anymore. This guitar, also, I have set up for just one volume and one tone, so that second tone knob doesn't do anything. It's just there for looks. I've sometimes thought about wiring it up differently or maybe putting a switch in there or something, but I really love the traditional look of this with the volume tone, so I think I will just leave it the way it is. This, I believe, is a 2019 Blacktop Strat. One day a student showed up with this guitar. She didn't know anything about guitars. She just wanted an electric guitar, went to a store. The guy recommended this. She had no idea that she had bought a very strange Stratocaster. The second I saw it, I thought it was so ugly, but still kind of neat. It reminds me so much of the SG that Hendrix played on the Dickie Cavett show and some other live performances. Triple humbucker, mahogany body, the amp knobs, the sort of blacktop amp knobs, oversized headstock again, which I love. It was just so unlike any other Strat I had seen, especially, say, for example, the mahogany body or three humbuckers, that I couldn't resist. And I was working at a music store, so I got a discount on it. I like it because it couldn't be more further removed from my shell pink Strat. So I have two Strats I love, and I have two Strats that sound completely different from each other. They couldn't be more opposed in tone. This is a Typhoon Strat that I bought off of a site called Kijiji. I don't know if that's worldwide, but it's sort of a buy and sell in Canada. Typhoon, I guess, was made by Diodario for a few years. It is really just an entry-level Strat, but I think it sounds great. I used it at work all the time for teaching. I just left it so that I wouldn't have to bring a guitar. The whole point of me getting this was to leave a guitar at work so I could maybe ride my bike to work or just not have to carry gear on the way home. I have modded it a little bit. You can see it has a kill switch next to the volume knob, which I don't really use. It was more just an experiment to see what it was like to install a kill switch. I also like my Shells Pink Strat. I have this wired up with just one volume and one tone. But in this instance, the second tone knob I have wired up to the neck pickup so that I can, if I put the guitar in position 2 with bridge and middle, I can then begin to blend in the neck pickup as well. Or I can just have, say for example, the bridge pickup and then blend in the neck pickup. So I think it's a cool mod, and it was super easy to do. I like the different tones I can get. I think this guitar plays great. I don't think I've ever touched the truss rod in it. It has never budged. It never needed the fret ends filed. I did replace the nut in it. The nut was terrible, like a cheap plastic nut, like you would expect. And I also replaced the tuners. I put locking tuners on it because the tuners were kind of garbage. It had trouble staying in tune. Other than that, it's a Polonia body, and it is so light. It's easily the lightest Strat I've ever picked up. I swear it's almost as light as that little ukulele bass. I paid $80 for it from some guy who, like a lot of parents, got their kid a guitar. The kid didn't want to play guitar and he had to unload it. I got it with a nice gig bag. Probably the best $80 I've ever spent on a guitar. If I ever see one of these guitars for sale again, I'm always tempted to buy it just for the pickups. Here we have my Mahogany Taylor GS Mini. This is a mini concert, I believe is the shape. I really wanted a smaller size guitar. I've heard so many recordings, and I've got some friends with these sort of smaller guitars, and I think the sound is so nice. And the second I got this guitar and played it, it really was like the exact sound I was looking for. It just has such a nice mid-range. It's hard to explain. I think if you've played any of these little guitars, you'll just know what I'm talking about. Even though it's mahogany, I mean, it's all plywood, so I really don't know how much the type of wood affects the tone when it's a bunch of layers of wood all stacked and glued together. But regardless, I have no issues with the tuning on this. The nut was cut really nice right from the factory. It came with a gorgeous gig bag. It sounds great. It almost has become my go-to acoustic. It's the one that I have out all the time. It's very nice to just sit, strum along or whatever. And again, being left-handed, there are so few options for me. Seeing a nice quality-made Taylor that's left-handed didn't break the bank. This was a great investment. So here we have the first acoustic I ever got. This is a 1998, I assume, Simon & Patrick. I got this May 16th, 1998, the day Seinfeld ran its season finale. That's the only reason I remember that. It is basically stock, new nut, and that's about it. The bridges had to be re-glued. The top has got some really bad cracks in it. It's going to fall apart at some point. And that was one of the main motivators for me getting the Taylor GS Mini. I just didn't want to go without an acoustic guitar. There was something so nice, obviously, about just being able to pick up and play rather than having to plug in or turn on an amp, any of that stuff. I really appreciate the simplicity and the honesty of an acoustic guitar. You cannot hide behind any effects or anything like that. And this is a used La Patrie Etude guitar that I got when I was still working at the music store. Someone had traded this in. It was sort of marked down because it has some really big nicks in the back of the neck that you can feel. Like they're in places where you would put your hand. It doesn't feel great, but the guitar sounds good. It's in good condition. The top isn't cracked or anything like that. It just has that bit of damage on the back of the neck. I do not really play acoustic or classical guitar anymore because I have a pretty damaged right wrist, and I find a lot of the shapes in classical music really kill my wrist. Even some of the stuff just for playing steel string or playing electric, chords on electric, that can hurt my wrist a lot too. The nice thing about electric is the tension is so much lower, the strings are so much thinner. Not that classical guitars have a lot of tension on them, but I do find my wrist hurts when I play this guitar. So it mostly stays in a bag. Lately I've been thinking about selling it, but I kind of want to always keep a nylon string guitar around. They have such a beautiful sound to them, and maybe I'll figure out something I can do with this that doesn't destroy my wrists. And that really brings us to the end. I thought about maybe including some of my amps and whatnot, but this video is already going to be 1,000,000 years long, so let's end it there. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions about anything, if you're crazy enough to stick around this long and you got questions or anything, leave them in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.